So really a meteoric rise for Corey Hetherman. Corey Hetherman. Corey. I like this guy, man. He's a gritty football coach. He's a Northeastern dude. Born in Massachusetts, okay? Did play quarterback. Was an offensive coordinator for the first couple of years of his tenure, but then went out there and he worked his way up. I mean, he was at Northeastern, Western New England. Really has been a linebacker coach for a long time and is actually in his mid-40s, I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly. So an interesting kind of background, but really he's only gotten to be a defensive coordinator. I guess at James Madison, he was a defensive coordinator as well. And then at Minnesota, he did a really nice job in 1 year. But he also was at Rutgers with Greg Schiano. So he has solid linebacker play. They're going to fit the run game really well. Miami is striving to be a defense that plays sound defensive football. Corey Hetherman, I don't think, is going to call the most exotic things in the world. Now, this is kind of almost this is a risky hire. Tom Allen, to me, Tom Allen has a bigger floor at Clemson than this guy does at the University of Miami. This comes with risk because this guy, because Corey Hetherman has only really been a defensive coordinator at Minnesota for one season. And he was at Rutgers, but he was a defensive assistant to Greg Schiano. If I look at what Minnesota did this year from a defensive perspective, they were okay against Penn State, pretty good. They were good against what was it? USC at home, Coy Parrish was very good. They did get sliced up by Rutgers and Athan Kaliak-Manis. So they also allowed Iowa to gash them really badly earlier in the season. I think Minnesota this year lost 4 games. I think they lost Penn State. I think they lost Michigan. And they ended up losing North Carolina. And that was the first game of Corey. So Corey at Miami can probably, the problem about Corey is it looks like he does bounce around a lot. I guess he's at Maine for 3 years, Old Dominion for a couple. So he has climbed the ladder, and that's what you got to do when you're at a lower level and you want to climb. Maybe did Corey want to get away from Fleck? Maybe Joe Rossi was there for a little bit, but I would have went with. You could have went with Corey Hetherman. Maybe he's a rising star, and he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. He's nice yet intense, and probably crushed the interview. But I don't know if he's ready for this pressure that's going to come with, Miami football. Now, Lance Guidry, I think Guidry was calling defense for a longer time. You didn't go out there and get a Florida defensive guy. You didn't get a defensive coordinator from the Florida area. Let's look at the SEC. Let's put our heads together here. I'm surprised that Will Muschamp. I would have paid Will about $2 or $3 million. You could have paid Will big money to probably leave Georgia. Let's look at Hugh Freeze's staff, trying to even think of the defensive coordinator at, it's DJ Durkin. Okay, he's bounced around a little bit. You could have went, it's interesting where they went here. Mike Elko. So he does have Schiano roots as a defensive coordinator, and he has done it at a smaller level, so he does know how to develop. He knows, I think, how to coach up talent. Is he going to recruit that well is an issue, is something I have a question for. And also Joe Rossi at Michigan State, he's a really good defensive coordinator. Brent Pry is a sitting head coach, so you're not going to go out there and get him. Man, oh man. Thinking about the defensive coordinator, thinking about what Miami was going to go out there and do, let's try to put our heads together and think of a better defensive coordinator option that is out there in this space. I mean, maybe they could have went out there. They probably even could have gotten Tosh Lupoi. So Oregon had a nice defense, and Tosh Lupoi's been at DC for a while. You could have went out and got Mel Tucker as well. You could have maybe looked at Pat Fitzgerald. These are two coaches that got let go due to scandal. Patty Fitz was a hazing scandal at Northwestern, but Pat's done it a long time. You also got Mel Tucker, who was on the staff with Mario. So there's a lot of talent that was on that Alabama staff that Mario could have went out there and gotten. So he could have gotten Lupoi. Lupoi was there with Mario at Miami. But maybe Lupoi, again, wanted to stay. Let's look at USC, Matt Entz, Danton Lynn. So that's a pretty good defensive staff. You could have looked at Notre Dame, maybe. Notre Dame has really good defense, Georgia. So several of these programs, I would rate the hire, honestly, I'd rate it a C because I'm very worried about the hire. Like, it could be good, but he'd have to kind of surprise. I think that he's young. He's only called defense for 1 year. He's only been a defensive coordinator 1 year. 1 year at the Power 5 level. Miami, with all that money and resources, you're trying to be the best in the ACC. You hire a guy who's only called defense for 1 year. So, again, like, Corey's a great guy. Like, am I rooting for Corey to do well? Like, yeah. You know, he was at Minnesota. He had a decent defense this year. I'd say that he did a fine job at Minnesota, but I'm pretty, I'm a little surprised like that. And I don't blame him for probably leaving to go to Miami because he's going to get a lot more talent to work with. He's going to be in a big spotlight. But the fact that Miami is going to go out there and hire a guy who's only called defense 1 year could even be a C- hire it. So Corey did fine, all right, but very skeptical, obviously, of this move for Miami football. All right. And it's such a wait and see. And we're going to see what happens.